The Davinci Color by XYZ Printing is up and running again and actually working better than ever. But there were some lessons learned in getting to here. Honestly, the Davinci Color is an amazing 3D printer. I am constantly in awe of the full color and absolute detail that it is able to do, what no other 3D printer on the market can do, and I am still super impressed with it. Last year, I opened up my Davinci Color, and yes, I had some ups and some downs in getting it up and running, but those worked out in the end, and I was starting to get some good results. Now, I had my printer out away from the house, and I just wasn't able to get out there to either start the next print or unload those printer cartridges. I knew I had wasted my ink, that it was all dried up, and that was my fault. Plus, I also screwed up the level on the build plate, and that was getting frustrating, and so in frustration, I said, ah! And I knew I had screwed up the ink, so I was just going to wait. I was just going to wait and buy new ink and install that when I got a chance. And then low poly dynos happened. And then I decided, you know what? It's time to get back into printing with the Davinci Color. So I took it to the maker space where it is right now, where it can be in front of me and I can start working on it. This was in November. I pulled out my inks and tried to load them, but I discovered as I was unpacking the inks that the inks that I had purchased, the magenta and cyan in them, were bursting in their package, which is odd. And I don't know why that was happening. But Davinci Color had actually comped me 2 other packages of ink. So I thought, no problem, I'll just open one of them up. And sure enough, magenta and cyan bursting out of their packages. So I contacted Davinci Color. Well, it was around Thanksgiving and they were a little bit slow to get to me. When they finally got to me and I prodded them enough, they said, okay, send us the inks. And I was slow to get the inks to them. And then Christmas happened. And then New Year's happened. January, I popped in and I said, guys, what's happening? Well, we don't know if we've gotten your inks yet. It's been a month. You guys should have my inks. And eventually they said, okay, we got your inks. We're going to send you some new inks. And it took them until February to finally get this whole thing straightened out. Now, this might sound like a customer service nightmare, but it really wasn't that bad. It was just very slow. No, if you want a customer service nightmare, buy something from DJI. Those guys are crooks. Worst customer service ever. I ain't touching those guys. Ever again. Ever again. I think what it boils down to is XYZ Printing is just a slimmer company than they give airs about. But their customer service did keep me in the loop the whole time. And in the end, they not only got me inks, but they got me the new stuff. They're creating new formulations of inks that are better than ever. And I was super excited to get these because the prints that it's producing are amazing. Now, I want to reiterate that this 3D printer needs to either be kept running or you need to pull the inks out, which means you need to plan to be there at the end of every print or within 24 hours of the end of every print. This is something that they will remind you about in their new firmware and their new software over and over and over again. They don't want your inks drying out anymore than you do, and they're making a point of making sure that you know that. But that means that you have to be a little bit more thoughtful with this 3D printer than you do with your normal 3D printers. The full color process is slower than your normal 3D printing process because it's not just laying down the filament, it's going over it with the inkjet head between every single layer. Now, I mentioned that I got new inks, and you remember, or if you don't, but with the old inks, I discovered that I needed to print things at a high resolution to get good color. Not so with this new ink. As soon as I loaded it up, I tried printing one of the sheep from Pasture just to see what it would look like in full color, and remembering my lesson from last time, I printed it at 0.1 millimeter layers, and I quickly noticed that this print's color was getting blown out. It was way too strong. And I thought, could this new formulation be permeating through a 0.2 millimeter layer? So I stopped that print near to the end, and I printed another one the next day at a 0.2 millimeter layer height. And sure enough, the colors turned out much better. This is exciting. This is great. This means that anytime you print, you're going to get great color on this printer. I just kind of wish that when we did a 0.1 millimeter layer, that it would put down, I don't know, half as much ink per layer, or maybe just put down ink every other layer. I'd rather half as much ink. I'd like to get more resolution on these prints so that I could do cool things with it. It's exciting the way that it's going, but you know, I got a beta unit. This is still a very new technology, and XYZ Printing has been listening to these suggestions from me. We'll see what happens in the future. I really hope that I'll be able to do high resolution prints in the future. That would be super exciting.
You know what it's like. You see a cool new filament and you want to try it out, but as you're hovering over that buy button, you remember the last 3 spools of fancy filament that you bought, used for that one thing, and haven't used since. It sounds like you need the 3D Printing Professor Filament of the Month Club. Each month you'll receive a generous coil of just the good stuff, enough to work with it, but not so much that you'll feel guilty later.
Thanks, 3D Printing Professor. Wait, that's me.
Join the Filament of the Month Club today.
Now, because you need to keep this printer printing, it might be a good idea to have a print that only takes a little bit of time to do. Something thin, not necessarily very thick, not necessarily very many layers. A maker coin would be a great idea, but I came up with the idea of a 3D printed business cards. Now, other people have made 3D printed business cards in the past, but what they do is they print the first couple of layers in white, and then they print the text on there by changing the filament and printing it in black. And that works, and that's cool. And if you have a single nozzle 3D printer, you can totally do that. But this, because it's like an inkjet printer going over it, you can get much higher detail and resolution. This is super cool. I look forward to handing those out in the future as you see me in the various fairs and things like that. Now, I can tell you that this is a powerfully engineered, possibly over-engineered 3D printer. At one point, I was doing a print that, in fact, it was this print right here on the bottom. The bottom of this piece is separate, and it doesn't have any color. I do it in white, so it didn't lay down any color. And it was close to the top, but I needed to leave for the day, and I didn't want it to be sitting there for 16 hours waiting for me to return. And so I thought, I wonder if I could just yank the inks out. I thought worst case scenario, I might accidentally shift the layers and have to cancel the print and just redo this part by itself. Not a big deal. So as the printer is going, I'm flipping up the tops and I'm pulling out the ink cartridges, which I'm pretty sure XYZ Printing would not recommend I do. But I'm flipping up the top and I'm yanking, and the ink cartridges aren't coming out easy. Maybe it's because the head's moving around while I'm trying to do this thing, but I'm pulling out the ink cartridges and okay, got that one out. And I'm pulling out there and getting that. And I'm really yanking on these things, and it did not even budge on the print. These motors ain't messing around. They ain't weak. They are powering these things properly. It is a well-engineered machine. Now, the Davinci Color Mini, is it also over-engineered like this? Is it also able to take a beating and just keep on going and make high-quality prints? I don't know. But that is kind of the way XYZ Printing. I get those confused a lot, but this is the way XYZ Printing works. They make over-engineered machines that they sell at cost or at a loss, and then they make that up in the materials. And yes, the materials for this machine are expensive. To fully refill this 3D printer costs a pretty penny. Unfortunately, you don't have to do it very often. I've been using this now for over a month, and all of the inks are just barely 1 or 2% below full. So they will last a long time, provided that you take care of it. However, you know, and this kind of goes out to Davinci, to XYZ Printing. I would be happy with a third the amount of ink per refill if it meant that it was a third the cost and that I was wasting less if I was an idiot and let it all dry up. I think that that would be a good choice for you guys. It would lower the cost for the people. And yes, we'd run through the ink faster, but it would lower the cost for the refill and not make that sting as much. But there is an elephant in the room that I should really address. See, XYZ Printing has the habit of using chipped filament. Chipped filament in the sense that there is a microchip on the filament spool that they read so that they know what filament is coming in, and so that their printers won't print unless you're using their chipped filament. And a lot of people seem to think that that is a dirty business practice and very bad. In fact, I've been saying since the MakerBot days that that's so bad. Why would they possibly do that? Now, I want to know, and I want you to tell me in the community, is that the only thing that XYZ Printing does that you find is bad? I say that because I'm about to say some things that if they're doing other evil, nasty things, I'd like to know about. But if chipped filament is the only bad thing that they do, then that's really not that bad. Now, I will say that if XYZ Printing decided tomorrow that they were done with chipped filament, their printers would become my #1 recommended 3D printers because they are solid. They are well built. They are over-engineered, and that is fantastic. But I know why they're going to say that they can't do that. They're going to say that they can't do that because their business is based on selling 3D printers at a loss or at cost and making up that money and making their profit on the filament. And if you aren't forced to buy their filament, you might buy it elsewhere. And that's true. However, if they dropped chipped filament and with these incredible machines, it's possible that some people might still buy filament from them even at the increased cost for two reasons. One, if XYZ Printing approaches this from the standpoint of we're doing that, we're throwing ourselves at your mercy. You might go somewhere else, but we hope you'll come back to us. We are a group that likes to run on principle, and so there will be people who will buy their filament from XYZ Printing just to support them. And also there will be the lazy people. Grandma who bought a 3D printer for her grandson. Her grandson says, I'm out of filament, I need more. And grandma goes right back to where she buys it. There's nothing wrong with that. My thought is, if they were to drop the chipped filament, they would see an increase in their audience, which is a very good thing, which would lead to an increase in their filament sales, even if it's not proportional. If they increase their audience by 500%, but only a quarter of those people come back to them for filament, they've still seen an increase. And this will be, I mean, I'm no business person, but to me, I punch those numbers into my calculator and I see a happy face. I mean, for all the troubles I've had with them, I still really like XYZ Printing and I really like their machines. And honestly, I'm willing to throw in with them. I'm willing to say I support them. For me, yeah, that chip filament keeps me from making them my #1 recommended printer. But at the same time, I would not tell anybody that they had made a mistake buying an XYZ printer because they are still high quality, good machines. And I wouldn't tell anybody that they had made a mistake buying a Davinci Color at this point because it does, like I've said so many times before, what no other 3D printer does. And I cannot wait to show you guys what I'm doing with this in the future because these are so cool prints. And I've got not just some fun toys and games, which I do have lots of fun toys and games, and it's good for fun toys and games, but I've also got some twists on useful prints that I can't wait to show you as well. And it's a super exciting time to be in 3D printing with great technology like this still coming out. But there you go. There's my experiences up till now, and expect to see some more color prints from the Davinci Color from me in the near future. Thank you very much for watching. Hey, if I mentioned anything in this video, you'll find a link to it in the cards, and you should check that out. Did you know that I'm social? I've got links to all the socials, and you should stop by and say hi. I really kind of enjoy it when that happens. Big thanks go out to my direct backers, and if you want to know more about how you can become that, there'll be a link right here that you can check out. And as always, I want to remind you, safety first, because I care about you, and I'll see you next time. Oh, that's interesting. Classic one there.